Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Caitlin Elliott, and as you all know, last month was Black History Month, and I hope you all enjoyed the videos that I provided you guys with, and I really enjoyed doing the research and getting everything out there that I could about the cases that I covered. So today we're going to shift gears back to my normal True Crime Tuesdays and Crimes of the Times Fridays. And for today's case, we're going to be talking about the murder of Vanessa Guillen. And so I remember finding out about this case, and I was just shook. It was crazy what had happened to her, and unfortunately this type of stuff still happens today. So without further ado, let's just get into the case. So in 2020, she was 20 years old, and she had gone missing. And Vanessa, she was born on September 30th of 1999 in Houston, Texas, and her parents' names were Rogelio and Gloria Guillen, and she was one of 5 children to the Guillen family. And Vanessa, she was a PFC in the United States Army, and she was stationed over at Fort Hood, and she had gone missing on April 22nd of 2020. So Vanessa was said to have been a very spunky woman growing up, and she had very high energy along with being pretty athletic. And as a child, she had played soccer and was said to be pretty amazing and skillful at that, and she even ended up playing it in high school. So Vanessa, she ended up graduating from Cesar E. Chavez High School in the year of 2018. She actually graduated in the top 15% of her class, which is incredibly impressive. And Cesar E. Chavez High School, it was a school that was known to be made up of a lot of lower income families from that area, and I usually find it really inspiring when people come from like a lower income class family and they go and make something better of themselves. They don't let that define who they are. And that's the kind of person that Vanessa was. And in the months leading up to her graduation, Vanessa knew that she had wanted to join the Army. And when she did, she signed up and she shipped out to basic training in 2018, just a couple days after she had graduated from high school. So she arrived at Fort Jackson and she finished both basic training and her AIT school before beginning her Army career as a 91F. And for those who aren't aware of what 91F is, a 91F is an Army small arms and artillery repairman. So for this particular MOS to be a 91F, you are responsible for keeping a variety of different weapons working properly. And in order for a recruit to even have this job, you need to have at least a 93 on the general maintenance portion of the ASVAB, and you also needed an 88, I believe, on the general maintenance and an 85 on the general technical. So the weapons that were needed for this job needed to repair were small arms, field artillery, large ballistic missiles, and towed artillery. And in order to train for this particular MOS, you need to have 10 weeks of basic combat training, and this was required. And from there, soldiers would be sent to their AIT school to complete their required training. After Vanessa had graduated from her AIT school, she got her first duty station and she was sent to Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Fort Hood and just how truly sketchy of a place it really is. And Fort Hood is an Army post that houses hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the base along with their families. And as part of a base's responsibility, they are supposed to obviously protect the soldiers. And that's not the case at Fort Hood. Just in the year of 2020 alone, just 2020, over almost 40 soldiers have been murdered or gone missing under suspicious circumstances. And most of them have never even been located. Not only are all these mysterious deaths and disappearances at Fort Hood, but Fort Hood has also been home to not one, but two deadly mass shootings. One was in 2009, and the other one was actually in 2014. And in 2009, the shooting was carried out by a U.S. Army major, and his name was Nadal Malik Hassan, I believe. And he was said to have shouted Allahu Akbar, which basically means all praise to God, before shooting and killing 14, and he injured an additional 33 people. And of course, I am not saying at all that anyone who is of the Muslim religion or anything like that will become a terrorist or anything like that. I don't care what kind of religion you are, as long as you're respectful to me and you treat me nice and you're a good person. I don't give a shit what you do. You could, believe in a balloon. That could be your God. I don't care, That's just how I am. But a lot of people are hateful towards Muslims because of that situation and what happened with 9/11. And in 2014, the other shooting that occurred was done on April 2nd of 2014, and there was 4 people, including the gunman, his name was Ivan Lopez, were killed, and an additional 14 were injured. So along with all of this that has happened there, the missing and the shootings, Fort Hood is considered one of, I think, if not one of the largest military base in the United States. So at first, Vanessa, she really enjoyed living at Fort Hood, and she loved being able to perform a job that she's always wanted to do. And for Vanessa, being in the Army at Fort Hood was just a dream come true. And she would constantly call her mom and just gush about how great she felt about being able to work her job. And she would also just call up and check on them and let them know how she's been doing. However, within just 3 weeks before she went missing, her parents started getting very concerning phone calls from Vanessa herself. And the way she had been talking to her parents, they could just tell that something was just wrong. And Vanessa and her mother were very, very close. And she would tell her mother basically everything she could. OPSEC and everything, you can't tell certain things. But everything that she could say, she would tell her mother. And Vanessa begins to tell her mother that she hasn't been sleeping well. And with the slight communication that was going on, like not as much communication that normally was happening, Gloria, the mother, started getting very concerned. And she kept trying to have Vanessa open up and tell her what truly was going on. And that was when Vanessa tells her mother that she has been sexually harassed by a soldier at Fort Hood. And this was very concerning and alarming to her mother, especially because the person that had sexually harassed her was her sergeant, which, if you don't know what a sergeant is supposed to be in charge of platoons and squads. And usually if you are an E5, which is a sergeant, you would have someone like Vanessa, like a specialist, would be in your squad, and you're supposed to be taking care of them. But this guy had been sexually harassing her, if you understand what I'm saying. So for those that are not aware, sexual harassment is actually a very common issue in the military, especially when it comes to females in the military. And the majority of the time, the person that sexually harasses the female soldier or any type of the soldier is someone who works very closely with that person that they were harassing. So it makes it extremely difficult to escape the person that has been doing this to you. And so Vanessa tells her mother that this person has made her terrified for her own safety. And that was when her mother had offered to report this person that has been doing this to Vanessa. And usually when you report that type of stuff, it is anonymous. But Vanessa, she said that she was going to try to take care of it on her own. So she turned down her mother's request to help her, and she said that she would do this herself. And she never did reveal to her mother the name of the soldier that had been doing this to her. So this really concerned Vanessa's mother. And as it turns out, right before Vanessa actually disappeared, she had been planning to go and talk to a higher up, a leader, about what had been going on, about the sexual harassment and who was involved. So on April 22nd of 2020, Vanessa goes missing from the Fort Hood base. On April 23rd of that same year, Vanessa was actually reported missing to the United States Criminal Investigation Division. And unfortunately, 2 months go by without any word as to where Vanessa could be, what happened to Vanessa, and there's just no information. It just basically just goes cold, like cold as ice. And in June of 2020, there was a $20,000 reward that was pushed out for any type of information that could lead to Vanessa's whereabouts. And this could tell where, like, this is for anyone that could tell where the could tell the MPs and the local police, I'm sorry, I'm getting all tongue-tied, where Vanessa is. So they're just wanting any type of information that could lead to her. So right away, a lot of people just started surrounding the gates of the Fort Hood base because they were just, like, interested that this was happening. This is supposed to be a safe base. Like, what's going on? And immediately everyone was suspicious of her disappearance. I mean, how could someone go missing on an army base? How could no one have seen her leave the base? And in order to get on or off of a military base, there is a gate, and there's an MP who would scan your ID to get you onto base. You have to have a military ID. And they would have noticed whether or not Vanessa would have left. Because, like I said, there's someone on either side. And she was supposed to have been in the arms room. So if she would have left base and she was supposed to be in the arms room, I definitely think people would have noticed. So when the public, they started hearing about Vanessa's disappearance, they started gathering outside of the gates of Fort Hood, and they started protesting that Vanessa would be returned safely and that they wanted her to be found. And unfortunately, on June 30th of 2020, Vanessa's remains were found. And it was nearly 2 months after she was last seen. Actually, it was over 2 months since she was last seen. And contractors, they had actually found her partial remains alongside a river called the Leon River in Belton, Texas. And on that day of April 22nd, 2020, Vanessa, she wasn't even supposed to be at work. I'm not sure, couldn't find out if she had like a 4-day, maybe she had staff duty and was told not to come in the next day. But either way, she wasn't supposed to be working. And someone had called her into work and told her that she was going to be working in the arms room that day. So, like I said, once you get called into work, you can't say no when it comes to the military. And so Vanessa, she starts getting ready for work, and then she makes her way over to the arms room where she is going to be working for that day. And she had been working there for quite a while, and she started leaving to another arms room, and she was going to verify some codes that were on some guns and just make sure everything matched up. So this particular weapons room was run by a man named Aaron Anderson. Now remember that name because it's very important, Aaron Anderson. And this was extremely bizarre because this was where they found Vanessa's bank card, her cell phone, her car keys, and her cat card. And this was all in the arms room where she was last seen. Now, I will tell you right now, when you're in the military, you cannot leave any type of stuff like that left behind. You cannot. That is extremely dangerous, and it's just all in all, it's a bad situation. You should never ever leave that around. And so MPs and investigators, they start asking right away if Aaron had seen Vanessa the day that she went missing. So Aaron, he did confirm that he saw Vanessa, and he helped her read off some gun serial numbers. And the police, they then checked Vanessa's phone records, and they noticed that her final text before she had died was to Aaron Anderson. And not only was her last text to him, but he was also the last person to have seen Vanessa alive. So after this, Aaron, he said that he had gotten into his car once the commanders had let him go, and he drove to his home off base, which is where he and his girlfriend Cicely lived, and she was waiting for him. Now, Cicely, her name is Cicely Aguilar. Remember that. That's very important to this case as well. And according to Aaron, he said that he had just chilled out with Cicely, and they just fell asleep, and he woke up and went to PT the next morning. So a whole month goes by. A whole month after that goes by, and Vanessa is still missing and is still considered not missing. She is still considered an unsolved murder case. And police and MPs alike, they're getting baffled by the lack of evidence for this case because nothing has come up. Every single track they have is cold. And there was just no clues as to why she died or how she died or what exactly had happened to her. And the police start interviewing witnesses, and multiple witnesses stated in their interviews that they saw Aaron Anderson carrying this DeWalt case, like a little toolbox, heavy-duty box, and he had left the base with it. And the same witnesses, they stated that whatever was inside of the box must have been very heavy because Aaron Anderson was struggling to lift it up and put it into his car trunk. And after he had managed to get it into his car trunk, that's when he left the base. And so after all these interviews, police and MPs had theorized that Aaron Anderson had to have been involved in this disappearance and in this murder case. So they started looking up all his information on his cell phone. They started tracking all his records and where he could have gone. So police were surprised that on the night of Vanessa's disappearance, Aaron had called his girlfriend Cicely multiple times. And what's really confusing is both of them had claimed that they were together the day that Vanessa went missing, like the evening. And if they were together, why were they calling each other all the time? You know, like if you're in the same house, you wouldn't need to call each other like that. So the police, they start asking Cicely the same question, like, why were you calling Aaron so many times? Why was Aaron calling you so many times? And she said, oh, you know, I dropped my phone and I lost it, and he was calling it to see if we could find the phone. And this is complete bullshit, because the phone calls that they found where Aaron was supposedly helping her find her phone, it was, you know, like how sometimes when you lose your phone and someone calls it and you find it, you instantly hang up. You're like, oh, I found my phone. No, so they were several minutes in length. So if she had lost her phone and she had found it, they had been like talking about something, you know? So it just made the police very suspicious of them at this point. So they bring up this fact to Cicely, and of course her story at this point changes. She's like, oh, that's not what happened. This is what happened. And she then stated that she had been taking a long pleasure drive that night, and she was actually in Belton. And so police then track their phones and find out that Aaron was on the bridge as well in Belton during that time. They had tracked that the two of them were traveling next to the Leon River, and this was for nearly 2 hours. And so police, they start to make their way to the Leon River, and they wanted to see what type of evidence they could find. And when they arrived there, they had found like a container, like a plastic cargo container, if you know what I'm talking about, like those big tubs. And so police were like, you know, what the fuck is this? So they start going over to investigate the plastic container, and as they're looking around where the plastic container was, they could see that the ground had been charred and burned, like someone was trying to catch it on fire but failed miserably because it's still there. And there was this very intense, just foul stench of decomposition coming from the bin. And so as they opened up the container, there was an even more intense stench of human decomposition, but there was nothing inside of it. So a few days later, some local contractors, they were working alongside the Leon River as well. And as they were digging up the ground, because contractors, they build houses and they build bridges and stuff. So as they're digging up the ground, that's when they find the remains of Vanessa Guillen. And on June 30th of 2020, the police then returned to the home of Cicely Aguilar, and they decide to re-interview her, like saying, oh, you guys were the last people to, your husband was the last person, not husband, your boyfriend was the last person to see Vanessa alive. We just found her body. You guys need to tell me what the hell is going on, right? So Cicely, she starts just confessing to everything. Now, I mean everything. So on April 22nd of 2020, Aaron Anderson, he calls Cicely and basically confesses to her of what he had just done to Vanessa. He's like, I just murdered someone. And he told her with little to no emotion that he had just murdered a female soldier on Fort Hood. That is what was quoted. He straight up said, I just murdered a female soldier. So that just shows you how little disregard and lack of empathy he had to what he had just done. He didn't care about Vanessa. He just called her a female soldier. Like, that's ridiculous. He worked with her for how long, and he called her a female soldier, like acting like you've never even seen her or heard of her. That's just so disrespectful. So the two of them, they drove to Leon River with Vanessa's body in that tub in his trunk. And Aaron, he then turns to Cicely and he asks her to help him dispose of the body. And Cicely, she agrees to this. And what's extremely bizarre to me is that the two of them have only been dating for a little less than 2 months. So they were together for 2 months, and he goes, hey, help me dispose of a body. She's like, okay, and she said that she helped Aaron dispose of Vanessa's body out of love for Aaron. Yeah, okay. So that's just 2 days after Vanessa had been murdered, Cicely starts taking pictures and posting them to her Instagram. And one picture that she had taken just 2 days after had this caption that said, the most dangerous woman of all is the one who refuses to rely on you to save her because she was never a damsel in distress. Okay. I'm laughing because that's like the weirdest thing to do is like after you kill someone is just to go on Instagram and post a picture. Like, what the hell? And so Cicely, she then told police that a few days after they disposed of Vanessa's body, they returned back to the Leon River with a bunch of concrete with them, like the liquid concrete, and you pour it over something and it harden up, and you'd have like a little sidewalk or something. And so according to Cicely, both of them had dug up Vanessa's remains, and they tried to burn the remains, but they weren't able to burn everything to ash. So according to Cicely, like I said, they burned everything they could and then started pouring concrete over top of her body. And once they finished, the two of them returned home and just cleaned up the clothes that they had been wearing and just continued going on with their day. Now, at this point, Aaron, he had no idea that Cicely just confessed to the police everything that they had just done. So he had no idea whatsoever, and he continues to text Cicely, and the police were actually with her when the two of them started talking about what they had done to Vanessa Guillen. And when they were talking, Aaron, he didn't deny killing her, and he was still sending Cicely these texts regarding the murder that they had just committed. And so to the police at this point, it's pretty obvious that Aaron Anderson and Cicely were the ones who did this. I mean, come on now. It's so obvious. Cicely just confessed. Aaron's sitting there bringing up the details. They knew. They knew they had their people. So the police, they start going to search for Aaron Anderson because they were going to arrest him and charge him with the murder of Vanessa. So the police, as they're going to I think they're going towards like the barracks or something, they're going to find Aaron Anderson. As they're driving along the road, they spot him and he's just walking. And so as they pull up next to him to try and arrest him. So as they do this, Aaron pulls out a handgun, points it to his temple, and pulls the trigger and kills himself. And this made me so frustrated because I was like, instead of facing the consequences from the actions that you had just done, you decided to take the coward way out and just escape by killing yourself. It made me so frustrated for Vanessa and her family, like, ridiculous. So there was actually an interesting theory that a lot of people have talked about, that Cicely was actually cheating on Aaron with someone else, and Vanessa, you know, thought that was her, you know, like, about how she had been sexually assaulted by Aaron Anderson. And Vanessa, she straight up thought that Cicely believed that Aaron was cheating on her with Vanessa. So when people say that he just got so upset that Vanessa would report him for his sexual assault, people are saying that, like, he got so upset that she would try to report it, that he just straight up got pissed off and murdered her to prevent her from telling. And the army, they tried to not claim fault, and they said that personally there wasn't anything that they could have done. And Aaron felt like he, according to this whole Cicely's the one telling all this, Aaron had apparently felt like he had been cornered by the police and the MPs, and he felt like the only way to stop Vanessa from telling anyone about what had happened to her was to bludgeon her to death with a hammer. So what I'm about to tell you, it's pretty sick and disturbing, so some of you might want to skip this part. I personally didn't want to talk about this, but it's just so vital to this case that it needs to be talked about. So you may want to skip that part. And so, Vanessa's sister, she travels down to Fort Hood while Vanessa was still missing to try and find any information that she could about her sister's whereabouts. And as she's searching around and asking about Vanessa, Aaron Anderson had the fucking nerve to walk up to her, and her sister's name was Myra, so he walked up to Myra, and when he found out she was asking about what happened to Vanessa, he laughs in her face and walks off. Yeah, after he had known that he had murdered her, he walks up to her sister's face and laughs in it. What the fuck kind of asshole, like, seriously. And besides all that, there's many people who, they believe that Aaron Anderson did not act alone and that someone else had to have been involved in this whole thing. And people had questioned the base commander at Fort Hood as to how Aaron Anderson was able to leave the base if he's supposed to be under supervision. He wasn't supposed to leave the base because he was, like, getting interviewed and questioned about Vanessa's death. So, of course, you know, the base, they refused to tell how Aaron managed to get off the base, because, you know, of course. And it's just, it's ridiculous. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, how are you going to let someone who's being considered a suspect in a murder case from one of your soldiers go off the base to kill themselves? It's just, I'm laughing because the whole thing is just ludicrous and ridiculous. Like, how? Why? Oh, God. And so people, like I said, people have questioned the base commander, and people also believe that Aaron didn't just lose his temper one day and just beat Vanessa to death with a hammer. No. They believe that Aaron Anderson had been planning and calculating this whole murder scheme with Cicely involved, so that he could find a way to get her alone and then kill her and make sure no one could hear. That is one of the theories. So, when living on a military base, it's extremely common practice to do a head count of all of the soldiers to make sure that everybody is back on the base who's supposed to be on the base. If you're living in the barracks, just to make sure you're back there, make sure every single soldier is accounted for. And for some reason, the day that Vanessa went missing, the Army had claimed that everybody had been accounted for, which is so weird because Vanessa was missing at that point. She wasn't just missing, remember, she had been murdered at that point. So why would they even say that? Why would they say something like that? Why would they lie? And it turns out, so they interview the guy who does the routine checks. And as it turns out, the dude was too lazy to double check and make sure everybody was on the base, so he just started checking off names because he just didn't feel like doing it. So, Vanessa's family, they strongly believe that the Army is covering something up, especially since the base commander made a public announcement on July 2nd of 2020 that there was absolutely zero evidence that Aaron Anderson was involved in Vanessa's murder in any way, shape, or form. And this truly pissed off and upset the community, and it was the community on base, the community around Kylene, and Vanessa's family. They were all just so upset because it was just so obvious that he was involved. It was so obvious. Cicely even straight up said that he was involved. The dude shot himself in the head whenever he was getting approached by the police. Come on now, you know damn well he was involved. So, Vanessa, she had constantly been telling her family that Aaron Anderson was the one who had been doing this to her and was the one that was involved in these sexual harassment, she, like, the way he would talk to her and touch her, and she just kept mentioning to her parents constantly, it was Aaron Anderson, Aaron Anderson, Aaron Anderson. And her mother decided she was going to talk to the U.S. Congress and told them about the case. And unfortunately, her mother got turned down because they told her that sexual harassment isn't a criminal charge. Okay, but if it's not a criminal charge, then how do people end up, like, people in offices and fast food and everything, how do they end up getting fired for sexual harassment if it's not a criminal charge? Explain that one. And so Vanessa's family, they're really starting to get pissed off, and they're starting to push Congress to pass a bill called the I Am Vanessa Guillen bill that would try to make it more safe to report sexual harassment occurring in the military. And as you all know, at the end of my videos, I like to talk about my personal thoughts and opinions on these cases, and that is what I'm going to do today. So, without further ado, I'm going to be talking about my personal thoughts and opinions on the case of Vanessa Guillen. So, I just want to give a huge shout out to all the men and women who are serving for this country, and I just want to applaud you guys because that's so brave of you guys. It's so amazing. And I hope you all are doing well. I hope you guys are feeling safe, and I appreciate everything that you guys have done for our country. And I also want to say that what happened to Vanessa is absolutely awful. And I hope that no one has ever had to go through what she has gone through. And if you have been sexually harassed in the military, please report it as soon as possible. And just, your safety is more important than anything. And it's just, this whole thing is so frustrating because I hate that Aaron was too much of a coward and not man enough to stand up for his crime of what he had done, that he decided to shoot himself in the head so he wouldn't get arrested. And like I said, I wanted to say that Vanessa's family, they're all still in my thoughts and prayers, and I hope that you guys are able to, I hope the grief is able to become easier as the years go on. I know it's difficult whenever you lose someone you love, but time will heal the wounds. And I am praying for you guys that you guys are all okay. And I hope that me talking about her case will get the word out there again that sexual harassment in the military still happens. And if you guys are in the military and you're experiencing something like that, you guys need to feel safe enough to report it. And that if you guys do not feel safe, then there is a bigger issue at hand. So, thank you all for listening to my lovely case about Vanessa Guillen, and I do apologize that it was pretty dark and pretty gruesome, but I would love to know what your guys' thoughts and opinions are down below in the comments section. Please keep everything respectful. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share this video with all your friends so the word about Vanessa will get out more and people will know more about this case and we can start pressing Congress more to pass this Vanessa Guillen bill. So, like I said, thank you all for listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys!